Okay. All right. Does it work? Are we live?
Think so.
Okay. Well, welcome to the end of the year cocktail apocalypse, the year in review. Stephanie Boudet, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Waking up. Uh,
Yeah.
Mr. Jeremy Anderson, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you? I didn't think you were to answer that question, but there
Yeah,
you
I
go.
did. I'm trying to find where I can put my name in here. Oh well. Anyway, I'm Nick. Everyone knows me. So year in review. We've got several things to talk about, but I thought the best place to begin would be with the doomsday clock.
Ooh,
Oh wow.
Yeah. And we are now, are you ready for this? Do you know?
I
90
don't.
90 seconds away from midnight. And yeah, and that is midnight is when the earth is supposed to become uninhabitable.
hmm
So 90 seconds.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And they're saying that 2024 is set to be catastrophic with wars and natural disasters.
All
Well,
right.
we'll have something to talk about then.
Yeah, I
Right.
know,
I mean,
right?
let's look at that silver lining.
hmm
Yeah, yeah. So I thought that there are several things to chat about. Maybe we should start, there with wars and natural disasters. So and that's apocalyptic wars and rumors of wars. So
Mm,
last year we had two biggies: the war in Ukraine, and
mm,
I don't know, I don't know about the language of war for what's going on between Israel and Hamas,
hmm
and I'm saying Hamas rather than Palestine.
Right.
yeah.
Although the Palestinians are definitely suffering,
hmm
Yes.
and you know, I don't know how much of this is shared in the media, but I was looking into the casualties, um, and so far there have been around 19,000 deaths,
Yeah.
and of those, almost it's about 17,700 have been Palestinians, mostly women
Yeah.
and children.
Right.
Yes.
you know. And that's according to the Gaza Health Ministry. And of course, Biden said that he didn't have confidence in those numbers, but apparently there was a governmental report that cited them, and the Human Rights Watch said that they consider the Gaza Health Ministry numbers to be reliable.
hmm
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think it's worth noting that in the first few weeks of this, more people have died than in the entirety of the Ukraine war.
Mm,
So it's catastrophic
hmm
for
Right.
the people going through this. It is apocalyptic for them. But I
hmm
also would say that it's given the area that we're talking about, it's I don't I would gauge my words carefully when using the word apocalyptic.
mm,
Right.
It certainly is for them. Um,
hmm
but also we talk about apocalyptic events occurring in that area of the world all the time because of
Right.
the biblical aspects of it
hmm
relating to uh, um, Jews, Christians, and Muslims. So,
Right.
yeah, I think that
hmm
gauges some caution there.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of my original concerns was there was, I think, and I'm guilty, I've not really followed up on this, but that there was rumors, again, rumors and of wars and whatnot, but that Iran had been behind the initial attacks, or at least funding them somehow, and that there was a connection then between Russia and Iran. And my immediate concern was that this could spill over into a worldwide war.
Right. But not just because of that, but because of the worry about Islamic nations backing Palestine against Israel.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they're calling in their allies to support them as well. But that connection, I've heard that connection as well. Connection right to Russia. And some people speculate that it's an attempt on Russia propaganda to distract from the war in Ukraine, particularly to divert forces and resources that the U.S. would supply to Ukraine over to Israel instead.
Yeah. Yeah. And how is the Ukraine war going? Does anyone, either of you have the latest on that?
No. They're holding firm. Ukraine is holding firm. They're gaining ground, but they've not gained as much ground as they'd hoped by this point.
Yeah. Yeah. And U.S. governmental support, I think, is always kind of tricky anymore.
Right.
In terms of funding.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Are there any other? I didn't do too much. I'm sure that there are other wars going on. Are there any? Those are the two main. Can either of you think of any other kind of wars that are happening?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Yeah.
Those are the two big in my brain.
Yeah, we should look into that. Yeah. Those are the ones that everyone knows about. So I thought that maybe we can move into politics for a moment. And I think that we're heading into an election season. And we're going to be doing a special episode, I believe, in October, entirely about elections and the apocalypse. And there's going to be a lot to say. And I think that one of the things that I would like to bring in that conversation, I'm just going to mention it very briefly here, but I think it's important in terms of the 2024 election, is the role of Christian nationalism.
Right.
And from what I've read, they have this deep sense that the apocalypse is coming for the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something we should cover. But Stephanie, what's the big apocalyptic event from 2023 politically?
The big apocalyptic event from 2023? Like the one?
Yeah.
The one?
Well, there's many.
The only one?
Yeah. But, well, I think this is probably one of the major ones, if not,
Are we talking about the actually 2022 one of Roe v. Wade? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in June of 2022, we all know that Roe v. Wade was overturned and went back to the states to decide. After the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the appointment of Amy, what's her name? Amy
Coney Barrett. Yeah.
Yep.
Coney Barrett. And there was just a new event that got disclosed last night.
Yeah, I haven't read
leak.
that. Yeah.
And apparently in that leak, she did not want to go on record for this. She
Amy
did.
Coney Barrett?
No, she did not. She did not want it to come to a vote. But once it did come to a vote, she did vote with the majority. But apparently she did not actually want this to come to a vote. She voted to dismiss the case because she thought it would make her look bad. And she's right. It did, in fact, make her look bad. But there's more coming out about this. And I haven't had a time to actually go through the whole thing and really digest it, but so look out for news about that. It's kind of coming out as we speak.
It's being revealed.
Yeah, it's being revealed now.
Yeah.
In as of this year, 2023, we have 14 states that have completely banned abortion rights in this country, with I think about 13 states in hostility towards any sort of abortion rights and still having some legal issues coming up with it. And only 23 states have either they have codified it or have expanded rights. So, we are very divided in this country about this,
Mhm.
and it's to me an apocalyptic event for women
Right.
um, to be in this nation and have felt that we had full rights as human beings, and then
Hmm.
have discovered that we, in some states, do not,
Right.
and then have that fear that if politically things go a different way, we might not have them at all.
Right.
And we have to ask ourselves, if you do not have personal autonomy, do you have any rights? Um, so it's an important thing. If anyone listening to this,
Mhm.
either now or later on, wants to know more about their state and where they rest on this, I think you should go to the Center for Reproductive Rights, and they have maps that will show you and where your state stands on
Hmm.
these issues. But yeah, I think this is one of the um, major events of our lifetime right here. It
Right.
just after 50 years having all of this, repealed, and it's just up in the air for us. And
Hmm.
um, if you think about it, if one of you were told that, well, you know, Nick, this person over here needs a blood transfusion and you're a match, and we're just going to take
Hmm.
some of your blood. Is that okay? No? Well, too bad. We're going to take it
Right.
anyways.
Hmm.
Is, you don't have any voice in this. Is
Right.
How would you feel?
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
And
Right.
that's what we're saying here.
Yeah.
Right. And
Um,
that's a little bit more close to home than you think, because I'm actually considered a rare blood donor.
mhm,
Most human beings are exposed to a virus that is considered harmful to infants and small children, but I was
mhm.
not. So my blood is actually acceptable for infants and small children. So rare blood donor.
Wow.
But
Hmm.
at this point, they cannot make me donate my blood to save children.
No, no.
That's lucky me. I'm a man, right?
Hmm.
Mm.
In some ways, but is that coming?
Yeah. Blessed be the fruit.
Right.
Right,
Well,
right.
and I think that this is why, even though that happened in 2022, I think that it's really important to talk about this year.
Right.
And, but I also want to suggest that maybe the nation in general, the population, the voting population, may not be as divided about
Right.
this, because every single election so far where it's
Hmm.
been voted on, voters have voted in favor of
Right.
abortion rights. I mean, we saw this in Ohio, of all
Yeah,
Hmm.
places, right?
yeah. This
Um,
year in Ohio.
yeah,
That's a good point. It's
and
really more the party
yeah.
that is putting this in place, not necessarily the people, although there are people back in the party.
Yeah. Well, I think that what happened, and I could be wrong, so please correct me, but a lot of these states that have gone to the extreme, that it wasn't something that the people had voted on
Right.
specifically. They put the people in place,
Hmm.
who
Right.
then put in the laws and everything. But I
Hmm.
think that if it goes back up to the voters, it seems, from what we've got in recent history, that the voters are like, yeah, no, we want to preserve these rights.
Right.
So that's a glimmer of hope. But then,
Mm.
of course, there is the fear of nationally. I've heard talks about trying to just ban it nationally to add to the
Mhm.
Constitution, make an amendment. And
Right.
that's a worry.
Yes.
That's a real worry. But yeah, women women are equal partners. They should not be seen as just mere bodies.
Right.
Right. And yeah, that's why I think this was a big issue of 2023. This is where it was all coming up that, we
Mm-hmm.
have people who are currently, we're seeing the outcome of this law and
Right.
all the nebulous things like, oh, this person is now carrying a non-viable fetus.
Mm-hmm.
This fetus is actually dead.
Hmm.
And now
Mm-hmm.
it's representing a health concern for them. They could
Right.
die.
Yeah.
Right.
So, why are they being forced to carry this? We're
Right.
also seeing medical professionals leaving states that have banned
Mm-hmm.
abortion, and that's going to send repercussions, medical repercussions for those states.
Yep.
They're not going to have enough medical professionals to, help in many situations
Right.
because why would you want to work in a state that's
Mm-hmm.
hostile to you?
Right. And,
You can't
and it's not
make.
just
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I was just going to say it's not just in the subject of abortion. That is the narrow in the medical side of things. Other than the whole human rights and bodily autonomy thing, if they can start taking the decisions away from the medical professionals in one instance, how does that spread through the rest
Hmm.
of the medical fields?
Exactly. Exactly. So this is like a revelatory aspect to the whole medical profession in states where it's
Mm-hmm.
banned. And you've opened up this can of worms for, what happens if this becomes law of the land, not just law of the state.
Hmm.
So
Right.
as we go into 2024 and the national election, this should be on everybody's mind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that the Democrats really need to be very open about this and
Mm-hmm.
very vocal about it and not be timid. Because Democrats have a tendency to be kind of timid on a lot of
Right.
things.
Mm-hmm.
Get out there and firmly state, yeah, we're for these rights, we're for women, and
Right.
this is important. And
Mm-hmm.
this is what's going to happen because if they cower and are equivocate or anything, they're going to lose. But if
Right.
they stand out in front, they're going to win.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Except for maybe Tennessee and Texas. I don't know,
Right.
because Texas hates that one woman
Right.
right
Florida.
now.
Oh yeah. That. Oh
Yeah.
my
Oh
God.
yeah, Florida too. Um,
Yeah. That one woman. Poor thing.
yeah, yeah. Is there anything else politically apocalyptic from 2023?
Oh. Just recently, a binder full of top secret documents was taken to Trump's office and then mysteriously disappeared shortly before he left office.
Gasp.
Have you heard that one? I know. I know. This is different
You
than the
don't
stuff
say.
but this is different than the stuff that Mar-a-Lago where he was stashing a whole bunch of stuff.
Mm,
And this, oh my gosh, I've got friends who are military people, and one of their top concerns for voting for a politician is top secret handling of top secret information.
hmm.
I mean, how can anyone vote for somebody who does stuff like this?
Honestly, I couldn't. This is just an aside. I could not understand how anyone in the military could actually vote for Donald Trump, given the things that he said about the military.
Right.
I always, my dad was career Army. He was a
Mm-hmm.
sergeant major. Both of my parents are interned in Arlington, and my parents were both Republican. And my mom watched. She had Fox News on every day, all day. And I often wondered how they would have voted.
Right.
And I don't think that they would have voted for Trump. My guess is they just would have sat it out. But the
Mm-hmm.
main reason is because of the things that he said about the military, but specifically the things that they said about John McCain, because my
Right.
parents adored John McCain.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew someone that I graduated high school with. I had a lot of people unfriend me on Facebook, but that were in the military. And I asked them, I'm like, how can you, in good conscience, vote for this man given the things that he said? And instead of responding, they just unfriended.
Right.
So there's
Right.
like this I don't know, a disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so the binder, that's a revelation, and there are ongoing revelations
Mm-hmm.
regarding all of the cases against Trump, because they all
Right.
came to fruition this year, right? That
Mm-hmm.
they all the charges finally came.
Right. Yep. And they're starting
Yeah.
to bear fruit as well.
Mm,
Rudy Giuliani getting charged or fined $148 million for his defamation
mm.
against private citizens
Yeah.
for, yeah, yeah. Well, oh my God, I'm trying.
Didn't they just unlock Trump's phone?
Yes, I
Yeah.
haven't seen the results of that yet, but I heard. Yeah.
Yeah, Jack
It's a
Smith
it's a
was using that.
bombshell.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah. There's still things being revealed with all of
Right.
this.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's going to go on in 2024.
Right.
All of this, because he said, I think the first trial the is in March,
Yeah. Mhm.
and I don't remember which one that. There's so many of them. I think that one is the, is it the January 6th trial?
I'm not sure, but yeah,
Yeah,
March something happens.
yeah, yeah. Next year is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be exhausting, I think.
Yep.
Um,
Vote like your country depends on it because it kind of does.
yeah, I think we're all getting a little, not a little, a lot exhausted with it because it's like every year, it's or every election is this
Mhm.
exhausting
Yeah.
sort of grind of vote like your country depends on it. But here we are, and
Mhm.
yes, vote like everything depends on it because it does.
Well,
Yeah.
I remember 20 years ago in the run up to the 2004 election, it was when I was still, before I moved to California, it was still in Denver, and I'm back in Denver. But I remember walking around leaving sidewalk chalk messages, and I would go through like the parks and everything, vote for Bush because we waited for the apocalypse long enough. And now it's like,
Uh, so, Nick, this is your fault.
no, but it's like the idea, though. I mean, there was irony,
Yeah, I know. I know.
in retrospect, it's like he
Yeah, it
wasn't
was
that
your fault.
bad.
Right. I know.
But no, I think that the point is true that we are exhausted, and quite frankly, I'm exhausted of Trump.
Hmm.
I'm tired of hearing him. I'm tired of seeing him, and I think that's a problem because people just check out,
Right.
and that I've seen this in many articles is that he'll say something so outlandish, and people just within like a couple of weeks were like, no, yeah, that's just Trump. But
Right.
there's real fears here. If he were to get into office again, I do fear that would be the end. That would be
Right.
the end of the republic. And he's open about it. He's like, yeah,
Hmm.
I'll be a fascist. I don't care. Um,
Right. I think the
Well,
term he used is dictator.
if you think about it, with him, if I were him, everything that he says, he really does come through with
hmm,
the threats that he makes.
yeah,
If he can,
Hmm.
and if he were to get into office again after everything that happened the last time he did, what makes sense is that he just eliminates all of his foes
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
He's a
because
vindictive person. Yeah.
it's just at that point, if he doesn't, what's going to happen this again, right?
mm,
Where he's
yeah,
now
Right.
being persecuted.
yeah,
You just eliminate it.
yeah,
We already know who he likes. He likes
Hmm.
to pattern himself off of,
yeah,
so I fear that more than anything is that he
Hmm.
gets in, and like the next day, anyone who opposes him, gone.
Hmm.
yeah.
Yep.
Well, and one of the things I was thinking about is that I I vary on this because part of me, I want to say, the man's just stupid, but I don't think he is, honestly. And I think that he is tapping into some very real and justified frustrations.
Right.
The problem is that it gets channeled in a way that's not productive. And so what I was thinking about was just as an example, the whole claims of like fake news, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where he is constantly saying, it seems to be that anything he doesn't like is fake.
Right.
But there are some real valid, legitimate concerns about the media and the corporate control of the media in this country.
Right.
And I think what happens is people understand that.
Mm-hmm.
They understand that, but they may not be able to connect some of the other pieces in a way. But so when someone comes out and says, "Oh, this is fake news," they're like immediately like, "Well, yeah, that's true. I'm going to follow this guy. He's telling the truth." Without getting at the underlying core, because Fox News is also a corporation,
Right.
and that's kind of the problem, is that we've got these corporations that are dictating the conversation, and you don't want to just give all control to one.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially one that's been successfully sued for spewing lies and false information. But
yeah, but it's also the case, and this has been going on for a very long time.
mm-hmm.
It's Jane Acree, and I forget her husband's name. This is an old court case, and if anyone's interested, they can look at the documentary, The Corporation, that goes into this. But they worked for a Fox affiliate, and they were going to do a news story on the hormones that were in the milk. That were being shot into the cows, and that ends up in the milk, and all the health concerns. And the Fox News affiliate, or the Fox affiliate that they worked for, was going to let them run the story, but then right before it ran, they're like, "Yeah, no, we can't do that," because of interest from Monsanto. And they ended up losing their job. They had to do something like 84 rewrites of the story. So Fox just kind of wore them down until they got to the end of their contract. So they ended up going to court because Jane Acree filed a whistleblower complaint. And they initially won. But then Fox appealed, and like CBS and I forget what others, but several other news organizations backed Fox in the appeal. And the appeal overturned the complaint, and the reason being, they said, was that there is nothing in the Constitution that says that news has to be true.
Oh my God.
Well, there's a reason for that, though.
Yeah.
I mean, because if you're like reporting something as it's unfolding, you may not have all the facts. Imagine like on 9/11, you're reporting on 9/11 and you're just like, well, this is what's going on. This is what I see. And things may not end up being true. And so as something's unfolding, you don't want to hold news sources accountable for that. But there has to be some kind of accountability, it seems, for the media, that, they can't just lie to us. There has to be some kind of integrity, but how do you enforce that?
Yeah.
But if you have Fox, CBS, NBC, CNN all together backing each other, then they can unite and get away with this. And it's one of those things where Fox routinely lies, gets away with it. And then we have other news channels that sometimes do that, or they leave out things. They just do it by omission, or they hire specific people who sell a message that they want to put out, manufacturing consent,
Creating necessary illusions.
Creating those illusions and such. But, it's like, we people need to understand that, one person's sins don't exonerate somebody else.
Right.
That CNN has its faults doesn't make Fox innocent. I think of Kurt Vonnegut talking about uh, World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Saying that one of the problems of World War II is that the enemy of the time, the Nazis were so bad and so terrible that by default we kind of accepted the Allies as being
Mm,
that wonderful by
right.
default,
Right.
and it's created this illusion ever since, and it's not true. We are, the Allies were capable of lying and being deceitful and such. It's just that the enemy was
Mm-hmm.
that much worse, and
Right.
we have to understand that. No, I mean, fascism comes in all sorts of
Right.
problems, and there's a great, I think it's in, I don't know if I can't remember which book it's in. I don't know if it's, I don't think it's in, um, I don't think it's in Slaughterhouse-Five, but one of the characters says, "You better make sure at Nuremberg here that you take out the fascists and you kill them with the stake at the crossroads. Otherwise, it's gonna come back." And I think we're seeing it back here, right?
Yeah.
We didn't exactly kill with a stake at the crossroads. We're seeing fascism rise up again, and
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah. Yeah. So, before moving on to anything else, any other apocalyptic or revelatory political events, news stories from the past year?
Yeah. Mm, not that I'm thinking of right now.
Okay. Yeah, I can't think of any either, but if they come up,
Right. Right.
yeah. So I think that now we can move on to the environment.
Mm. One
So,
cheerful subject for the next.
yeah. Well, and unfortunately, I found an article that also included some good things that happened in terms of the
Oh,
environment. I just didn't have the time to write them all down, so we're just going to stick with the apocalyptic here. Um, so 2023 is the hottest year on record
yay.
since records began about 150 years ago. June, July, September, and October were the hottest months ever recorded. September was hotter than the average July from the first 10 years of the first decade of the 21st century. The average global surface air temperature was almost 2 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is all going to be Fahrenheit for anyone in Europe or anywhere else in the world that does,
Right.
Celsius
That's
and
sensible
metric.
units.
Yeah. That's hot. It's hot. But yeah, it was almost 2 degrees Fahrenheit higher than the average for the 20th century. This is what's concerning to me is we also have seen record-breaking night temperatures.
Yeah.
July 6th in Adrar, Algeria, they faced the hottest night ever recorded in Africa. Temperatures never went below 103 degrees.
Oh my God.
Death Valley, here in the States, in California, recorded a night temperature of about 120 degrees. And that was the highest night temperature ever recorded. And the importance of the night temperature is that temperatures always drop at night to allow
Right.
for things, including the human body, to cool down.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
I saw one statistic because I know I can't sleep when it's hot.
Mm-hmm.
That on average, people are, because of the increasing temperatures, people are losing something like 44 hours of sleep a year.
well,
Wow.
So everyone's going to be grumpy because, well, that's happened when there's a heat wave. People are miserable and they're angry.
Yep.
The tempers are short.
Mm-hmm.
It's just nasty. Heat deaths. We're starting to see more and more heat deaths. In Europe, there were an estimated 60,000 heat deaths. In the I couldn't get a statistic for the whole of the U.S., but in Maricopa County in Arizona, I will be heading there next week. This is Arizona. They had 579.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah. In the southern hemisphere, there were areas that experienced daytime temperatures that were about 36 degrees above normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I should say I'm getting all of this from articles in Science News, and they linked everything to the reports. So, ocean heat was also extreme. Sea surface temperatures hit record highs. And one report said that they may have been the warmest they've been in the last 125,000 years.
Yeah, I remember that from September. They were talking about the ocean temperatures around the Gulf and around Florida area that were so hot. I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, and in the Gulf and some other places, the Caribbean, Eastern Pacific, Northern Atlantic, there's been widespread coral reef bleaching.
Yeah, yeah.
And I know that some people are like, well, so? But coral reefs are foundational for for the ocean ecosystems, and people rely on them, for fishing and for food.
Right.
They are incredibly important.
Yeah, do you like your sushi? You worry about coral reefs.
Yeah. Well, if you like living, you worry about coral reefs.
Oh, yeah, there's that too. But I mean, sushi.
Yeah.
Sushi.
Yeah. Sea ice in Antarctica hit new lows.
Yep.
I imagine it's the same thing in the Arctic. I don't have any statistics on glacier meltings. I don't know about the land ice, but I imagine that is also melting rapidly. And that's where the concern is for ocean level rises, is when the land ice melts, because there are two kinds of ice. There's sea ice and land ice, and it's when the land ice melts that we've got the problem, because it flows in. We've got an El Nino going on, and El Ninos typically mean higher global temperatures. And what I read is that typically the temperatures rise after the El Nino, but here we have them rising beforehand as well. Wildfires. The U.S. was kind of okay. California did not burn this year, but that's because of all the rains that they had. Is my guess, because they had apocalyptic rains before I left. My Friday office the trail got wiped out because of the rains. It was amazing. Canada, though, had its worst fire year on record.
Wow.
And we saw that we saw that in the U.S. because the smoke came down into the central and to the eastern part of the U.S.
Right. This guy.
Yeah. The boreal region, which is just south of the Arctic region, that it contains about a third of the world's forests. That's where a lot of the fires were. So apparently, globally, this was not the worst year for fires. I think that's because California was wet.
Right.
If California had been dry like it had been before, this could have been pretty bad. So we recently had, and I think that that's most of what I have for the environment. But we recently had a UN climate summit, the COP28. And I think this was held at the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, if I recall correctly. Nowhere near meeting the Paris agreements. Nowhere near. And if I remember correctly, I remember reading a news story that the UAE representative there really pushed about fossil fuels. And kind of suggested that, they don't play a part here. You know what happens, right? There was a lot of pushback from the OPEC countries. they did reach some kind of agreement. 198 nations agreed to loss and damage fund. So that, and a lot of that's like the developed countries putting in funds for the developing countries, because it's the developing countries that are going to suffer the worst.
Yep.
Because the developing countries are the ones responsible for all of this. The United States is going to be okay. Africa is going to suffer. And all of this, we saw Pakistan. What was it? Was it 2022? Like half of Pakistan was underwater. So the 198 nations agreed to loss and damage fund to help these countries. So far, it is $725 million.
Wow.
Are you kidding me?
No.
That's it?
Yeah.
That's apocalyptic.
Yeah.
That's an apocalyptic amount.
Yeah.
Because that's not going to do anything for them.
Yeah. That's like giving someone who is homeless and completely devastated a quarter.
Right.
Maybe a dime. I don't know.
And don't spend it all in one place.
Yeah, right. Right. I mean, seriously, Pakistan at one point, half of the country was underwater. $725 million is nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is supposed to be for all countries.
All countries, yeah. I feel my blood pressure going up.
Yeah, sorry. The final agreement at COP28 did not include language explicitly mandating phasing out of fossil fuels. They agreed to begin reducing fossil fuel use, but there wasn't anything in there like mandate. The UN doesn't mandate anything anyway,
right.
In their agreements. But the OPEC countries resisted language in the final agreement that countries would have signed saying, yeah, we will do this. But we also aren't really addressing methane emissions as well. And those are important because methane is a far worse greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide because it's heavier,
right.
if I understand correctly, but it doesn't last as long. You can clear out the methane in like 10 years, whereas carbon dioxide lasts for like 1,000. Mm. So.
And the ICPP released another report that basically said if we don't start right this second doing all the things that we need to do that we're not doing right now, it's really going to be horrifically bad for everybody. It doesn't really even matter if we're the United States or, a Western nation or, well buffered. It's gonna be really horrific. It's you got to start doing stuff right this second, and it's got to be stuff that's going to make all of us really uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. Like not using the stuff that we're currently using. Not driving the way we're driving, not using the heating and just how we're air conditioning, what we're doing with our housing right now. We have to redesign everything. The stuff that we have to put into actually cutting back on the fossil fuels that we're using is going to make everybody kind of miserable, and no one really wants to do any of the things that we need to do.
Right.
The underdeveloped nations are they're going to be the first to feel it, but we're all going to be a part of it. We're all going to feel it, and it's going to be horrible if we don't. And that was the positive part of the now I'm like, am I saying it right? ICPP report.
Yeah.
And
IPCC.
It was dismal, absolutely dismal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
IPCC.
IPCC. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay. It's it's still early, and we're drinking. It's happy hour.
Happy hour. Yay.
What else are you gonna
Yay.
do when it's the end of the world? You know,
Mhm.
I mean, and that was
Drinks.
the idea here. Actually, was something that Stephanie told me years ago. Was that when the apocalypse comes, she's gonna get herself into a little rowboat with like a half gallon of tequila and a gallon thing of chocolate icing. Write it out.
Yeah.
So-
What else is there?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
If you wait too long, no one's going to be there to make the icing. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Grab it while you can.
Well, I think that I don't know. It's such a big problem, and at the end we'll kind of discuss what's coming up next year for the cocktail apocalypse. But I know we're definitely going to be devoting an entire episode to. There's a lot we could devote episodes to in terms of the environment, climate change. We can do biodiversity loss because, I didn't mention that we're also, in the middle of or somewhere in the sixth mass extinction, which is human caused in many ways. It's not an asteroid this time. It's us. We're the asteroid. It's such a huge problem. And the phrase that I was introduced to when I was a doctoral student, and I love this phrase, is that it's a wicked problem. Because it's not just the CO2. It's not just trying to move away from fossil fuels, because there's so much else at play. And I think, and this I think is, in terms of apocalypse and revelation, and I'm going to use this, I think, eventually to lead into the next thing. But what has to happen, here's the question. We talk about sustainability, right? In terms of all of this. But the question is, what are we sustaining?
Right.
And it seems that what we're trying to sustain is not the earth, but a lifestyle.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what so many people, writers, talk about is paradigms. That what has led us into this is a very specific paradigm. And it's a materialistic paradigm. And with that, I don't mean by necessarily, this is part of it. I don't mean materialistic in terms of buying things, although that's part of it. But seeing the natural world, just matter is primary. And that matter is just dead stuff. Only humans have soul. Only humans have an inner subjective interiority necessarily. And so we can use the natural world however the hell we want. And there's all these values that are in this paradigm. And you can see this going back to the 60s where people are like, this goes back to like the new age that we talked about previously, that we need a new paradigm.
Right.
And I think the problem is, how do you do that? How do we shift the paradigm?
Honestly, I think it happens generationally.
Maybe.
I think we're going into a new one. I think we already are shifting into a new one.
Yeah.
It's occurring, and it's. I don't know if we have the time to shift because so many drastic things are happening right now, and it's going to be a matter of if that time crunch and the insanity of what's happening to us, if we can outlast it by, I think it's going to be on the margins. Are we going to make it? I don't know. It's going to be on the margins. And I think if we survive it, something very new is going to emerge.
Yeah,
we're going to have
right.
a new type of human, and it's not going to be something that's planned. It's not going to be something like, oh, these are the types of humans that really should come out of this. It's just going to be the type of human that comes out of it because it was forged from the crucible.
Right.
It's just,
yeah, and I kind of agree. I don't know that we can, I don't know. It's, and I teach this stuff, and I don't know. I tell my students, I don't know. And I recently taught a whole course on this, and the whole paradigm shift was dominant and understanding what the paradigm is. But even this generation that I was teaching to, I could see that there was a lot of hesitation in terms of questioning the paradigm.
Right.
Because they're still embedded in it.
Yes.
And how do you, maybe it's like what you said, Stephanie. It's that, it's just going to happen. And it's not going to be this, Gen Z or whatever.
Right.
what changes it?
What?
A volcano going off changes it. Changes it.
Or an asteroid, right?
Or an asteroid hitting it, or just like it's a whole bunch of things going off at one time, and if you're going to survive it, you're going to change. It's the zombie apocalypse. It's what needs to happen for people to survive it, and I think the human record shows what changes it. I think it's a whole lot of environmental pressures and
it's an apocalypse
and cooperation.
Yeah.
It's like what happens when people come together and say, oh my gosh, when we actually help each other, things move and change and we survive because we're working together and we care about each other and we want each other to thrive. It's like, that's what does it. It's not. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Are either of you familiar with the 3-Body Problem by Jishin Liu? Science fiction book.
No.
Okay. The whole premise is that an alien species or an alien race is going to invade the Earth, but they've sabotaged the Earthlings' ability to technologically evolve. So when their fleet arrives and our fleet meets them, it's destroyed almost immediately because we don't have the technology to match their prowess. But a couple ships escape, and these new humans evolve on these ships immediately because of that decisive moment. And they have to become something different in order to survive in outer space without a world to go back to. And this is kind of what we're facing. And goes back to what Stephanie was saying, that the paradigm shift does not come because we're thinking it through. It comes because we have to change if we're going to survive. And unfortunately, I think that's where we are.
Yeah. I want to build on that. I just wanted to add first that the paradigm shift has to include a cosmology. And I say that in the sense that the examples of paradigm shifts, and here I'm drawing upon Thomas Kuhn, who really gave us the language of paradigm shifts. And that scientifically speaking, we saw a paradigm shift going from a geocentric universe where the Earth was at the center and the sun, the moon, and the planets all orbited around the Earth in perfect circles. But there were anomalies in that, and it was the attempt to answer those anomalies that eventually led us to the paradigm shift of the sun at the center. right? And then we
Right.
ended up with a much larger paradigm where it's like, well, the sun's not at the center of the universe. It's just the center of our soul, kind of the center of our solar system. But we got this bigger picture. And as we get this bigger picture of what is real, what the universe is, that then turns back in onto us
Right.
and our place and who we are and everything. And so I think the cosmology aspect is really crucial here. Steph?
I don't know.
No?
Because I mean, yeah, we'll build a cosmology. I think that comes later because
Yeah.
the thing about Thomas Kuhn was he's right that that's what happened. But when we actually look at the science of the time with Thomas Kuhn, um, when he looks at the geocentric and the heliocentric, at the time when that shift occurred, the science didn't back it. The science that we had did not back a heliocentric. It turned out to be true,
Right.
but there was not enough science to actually back that. And we get that from Paul Feyerabend,
Right.
who basically challenges that aspect that, we go with the science. We didn't.
Right.
It actually, what changed the paradigm was that it was ripe for it.
Right.
There was enough backing of the community at the time to change the paradigm. Enough people had heard about it. Enough people were saying, "Oh, you know what? We could do this," and it shifted. It had nothing to do with the science.
Yeah, and I was only using that as an example, but please continue. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
But my saying the cosmology is something that will come with it. We will build something around it, and it will make some sort of sense to us. But it doesn't necessarily have to do with anything that is about our actual reality. I think it needs to shape our psychological reality.
Yes.
Cosmology is always about the psychological reality that we're in.
Yeah.
So it's something that we can't even think about right now because we don't know what that psychological reality is going to look like.
I would actually disagree a little bit with that. But what I'm saying is exactly what you were saying, but I would disagree with the idea that we don't know what it looks like. Because people have been talking about this. And when I'm talking about the cosmology, I'm talking also about our understanding of who we are. Because, it was always said that, like, with, I think Freud said this, that there were like the three big changes that were crucial to the human psychology. Was one, recognizing that we were not at the center of the universe. We were no longer the apple of God's eye. Two, that we were all just animals, Darwin. And then Freud, the third one was that we're all, not only are we, we're not the center of the universe, we're not the apple of God's eye, we're all animals. And then Freud came around and we're all sick animals, right? But I
don't think we've ever recognized that we're all just animals. I think we
agree.
Fight that.
Yeah,
we
I
fight
agree.
that tooth and nail. But I do agree that we are.
Yeah.
I think that that's the one thing that we just won't give up. That we are this exceptionalism is still at the heart of our psychological being. That once we kind of give that up and realize that we're basically herd animals, we might find some peace.
Yeah,
right.
That we are here to work together because we're herd animals.
Yeah,
accept it.
It's speciesism.
It's okay.
Yeah,
right.
It's speciesism.
I heard one person describe us as an social animal.
What?
There's only an social animal, which means there's only two social species on the planet, according to this person, and that is us and ants. The ants are more of a more of a collective than they are an individual by far.
Okay.
And this writer thought the same thing about us.
Hmm.
We're not just herd
Okay.
animals. We're earth-social. We cannot survive without others of our kind.
Yeah, well, that's true. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Aristotle recognized that over, 2,500
Right.
years ago that, anyone that thinks that they can exist, apart from other humans is either a beast or a god.
I'm a god.
Yeah,
I have to say that.
I'm a beast. I'm going to go with the beast. I'm a beastly god. There we go.
There you go.
Pan.
Yours.
Yeah.
But are you a sexy beast?
Well, look at him.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
I've been hitting the gym hard, man. But yeah, just in terms of the cosmology, I think that that's important in that it tells us our place and it tells us our connection to the universe. And it doesn't have to be scientific. It can be informed by science because most cosmologies actually come out of religions. And I think that, and this has been ongoing and we can address this later in another episode, but, there's been this critique that much of the Western world has been informed by Genesis. The Abrahamic traditions are informed by Genesis. In Genesis 1, God gives humanity dominion over the world.
Right.
And it was back in 1967 that Lynn White Jr., who was a UCLA historian, published, The Roots of Our Ecological Crisis. And he's like, yeah, you want to know why we're having this crisis? It's that. It's that idea that humans should be in control. And I think that when I talk about a cosmology, it's not just an answer to the beginning of things. And it's not just a scientific answer, but it is an answer to who we are and what is our place in the bigger scheme. And I think that has to be addressed somehow. So it's not just a scientific answer. It has to be a much bigger answer. And I think that answer is we've got it in some aspects. And I do see a generational aspect to this in the sense that, and from a religious, spiritual perspective, that we're starting to see, when you look at the statistics, there's this mass exodus out of Christianity.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what is rising, what's coming up to the front is a kind of paganism. Which, and I think that the foundation for that is a connection to nature.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So I agree in the sense that it's happening, but at the same time, I think that it is very, very difficult for us to actually question it because we are so embedded still in the old paradigm. And so I'm going to use this to lead into the next bit here. And this kind of also applies to what Jeremy was talking about in terms of the science fiction novel there. I recently... Oh, yeah. Well, we need to talk about AI. But let's get that here in a second. I'm going somewhere else first. I was teaching this class, essentially on religion and ecology. The title was Ecology, Economy, and Christ. And I was hired at the last minute, and the chair of the department's like, just do it however you want. So I kind of got rid of the Christ. My focus was on the Eden narrative, in a sense, but all the Eden and home, the idea of home. So the foundational text was Pope Francis, Laudato Si, Our Common Home. And we read, like Bell Hooks, we read Lynn White Jr., read part of Annie Dillard's Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, Norman Wiersbe's Paradise of God, and some deep ecologists and whatnot. But everyone kept talking about the paradigm, the shifting of the paradigm. And I kind of explained it as goggles, almost like Kant's irremovable goggles. That the paradigm we're in, we've got these goggles on, and that it paints everything we see. And then what we need to do is we need to take those freaking things off and put on new goggles. And the students, everything they said was still embedded in this old paradigm. And I did not assign this. I need to start assigning this in every class, I think. But there's this essay by Derek Jensen called You Choose. And it's a short essay. And he begins the essay by talking about a book, The Nazi Doctors, by Jay Lipton, I think. And in that book, according to Jensen, he's looking at, it looks at the doctors in the concentration camps. And these are all people who took the Hippocratic Oath to protect life. But yet they're working in a concentration camp. And that if the Jews there, some of them, he said, they cared. The doctors cared. So if a Jew got, sick, they may give them an aspirin or give them a few days of rest, or they may just kill them so the disease or the sickness doesn't spread. But he points out that, while the doctors cared, the one thing that they never did was question the existence of the concentration camps.
Right.
They never questioned the existence of this larger, in a sense, paradigm. And what Jensen does is he uses this analogy. And he's like, okay, instead of corporations, because that's, I think, one of the things that you hear a lot in terms of the environment is that individually there's only so much we can do. I can recycle until the cows come home, and I don't know what that means. But it has no bearing in terms of what our corporate overlords are doing. They're the ones that have to change, right? It's the bigger system has to change. And so Jensen asked this question. He's like, well, okay, instead of, and this is a critique of this corporate capitalism that we're in, the paradigm. He's like, okay, instead of corporations, let's imagine that it's aliens, space aliens that come down.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
they
what's
start,
up.
and they start clear cutting the forests. They start removing the mountaintops. They start polluting the riverways, the water ground, the aquifers. They start pumping pollutants into the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What would we do?
We'd fight back.
Yeah. He's like, what you would do? You would fight like hell.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we do that now? And we don't do that now because we are embedded in this paradigm.
Right.
Well,
And we
Nestle
never
makes
question
such
it.
good chocolate bars. Come on.
I know. Yummy, yummy chocolate. But that's the point. I mean, it's like, we can critique this paradigm, but we're still embedded in it. I'm still embedded in it. I still order from Amazon all the time. And we can critique this paradigm, but what do we do to remove ourselves from it?
Right.
Yeah, and this also has a lot of, a lot of it has to do, we have to check our privilege too, because it's like,
Bingo.
I might be able to order something from a local business that charges more, but for someone trapped in a cycle of poverty, are they going to be able to buy something that isn't at Walmart?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I have to recognize that more people have, especially right now, there are more people who earn less than I do right now and don't have the privilege of buying from, holistic sellers and such that, it costs a lot of money to do that. And even if they did, everything is so intrinsically tied up in each other. If you look at the trade agreements that are out there, and who's buying from what, and if you look at, actually, some of these trade agreements look insane. you know how much is being shipped overseas, and when you could be getting the same thing from your neighbor, but we have to get it from South America, or we have to get it from China or something, because there is an actual trade agreement that we must do this. And that's creating this massive carbon footprint, right? So when you look at how insane it is, it's like, how do we get out of this? How do we extricate ourselves from this mess? I don't even know where to begin with that. That's a lot of work.
It is. And there's questions of values. And I think that my greater point is that there are so many things we don't even question.
Right.
And it's like, just an example, Stephanie and you and I are both from Ohio. And though I'm never going to repeat that again, if anyone asks, I'm from Colorado. It boggles my mind. I would see people, it's like going to all you can eat shrimp or all you can eat crab legs at Red Lobster. And I love Red Lobster. Don't get me wrong. I love Red Lobster. And I'm in a landlocked state, right? But maybe it's awesome. But maybe there should not be all you can eat shrimp and all you can eat crab legs at a landlocked state, because they're not natural to those states. We eat outside of the cycles of the seasons. I love watermelon, but maybe I should not be able to buy watermelon in January because it's not natural. We don't eat locally. We don't eat seasonally. But I don't know anyone that actually looks at going to the all-you-can-eat shrimp fest at Red Lobster as a moral issue.
I think eating at Red Lobster is a moral issue, personally, but
so do I. For reasons other than what we're talking about, but
right. Your point is taken, though, right?
The biscuits are yummy.
It is.
I want more of those biscuits, those cheddar biscuits.
Yeah, you could buy that. You could buy that without going to Red Lobster.
Well, nevertheless, the point is,
yes.
I'm actually saying I shouldn't be eating at Red Lobster. And the stuffed mushrooms are really good too.
Yeah, they are.
But they're not seafood, so it's okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's this whole worldview that has to change, and we don't question it so much. Some of us do, but even the questioning, we're still so embedded in it, and that's where the sustainability comes in. We're like more concerned about sustaining this system, than we are the system that supports us, that allows for human life.
It also bears to say that when we do question it, we often cherry pick what we question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So environmental apocalypse we are in it.
Yes.
I think we are definitely in it. But this is the next one, and this was my lead in. I was talking about aliens. Jeremy talked about aliens. So let's have a moment of disclosure. UFOs. Or now it's the unidentified anomalous phenomena.
Right.
To
get it out there. Just to get that out there, but whoop-de-doo.
Oh, no, this is important, Jeremy.
Oh, okay.
Look, see, here. It's my shirt. Oh, you don't see prepare.
Yeah.
It's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming. It's big. I mean,
I want to believe.
Yeah. I do believe.
I really don't.
I do. I mean, this has been ongoing, and I wouldn't say whoop-de-doo. I mean, the fact, if we have evidence that there is other intelligent life, advanced intelligent
Right.
life, that's going to change everything.
Agreed. I agree with that.
That's going to change absolutely everything. Um, and I think it goes beyond. I like, I was thinking, I didn't like the change from UFO to UAP.
Okay.
And I thought about UAP as unidentified aerial phenomenon,
Hmm.
but it's not just aerial.
Right.
There is like with the oceans and whatnot. But if we start talking about anomalous phenomena, there's more to it than that. And this goes back to people like Jacques Vallée. And this is crucial because if we start talking about anomalous phenomena, this brings up questions about what is real. Right? Because Jacques Vallée, he made connections between, he's like, it's really interesting that there are all these correspondences between these stories of alien abductions and abductions by the Fae. It enters into
Right.
folklore.
Right.
It enters into questions of what is real. And I'd never say to the question of what actually is real, what's going on, I would never say, well, whoop-de-doo.
Right. I agree with that.
I'd be like, I want to know. I want to know what's real, what's going on.
Right.
Because it seems like it's a question of not just whether or not there are aliens, but ultimate reality, in a sense.
Yeah, I'm far more intrigued by some of the questions of what's really going on. I'm just not as I'm not following like the UFO, the UAP stuff so much of like little green men coming from UFOs, like landings of spacecraft.
Mm.
I don't see that. But the idea that there's something going on, something coming into maybe our reality, maybe our consciousness,
Mm.
I feel like there's something to that. And it has to do with a lot of the overlap now that people are talking about regarding a lot of the history of things like the Fae, a lot of the saints talking about revelations from like God or other saints or different types of encounters that they've had with beings that aren't necessarily due to a spaceship,
Right.
but through
Right.
some sort of internal encounter.
Right.
Mhm. Right.
I think there's something to that because we've seen this over and over throughout history,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and that seems to there seems to be something very real and strong with that.
Yeah. Well, and I think we need to credit, I mentioned Jacques Vallée, but also, and leave my personal stuff out, I guess. Jeffrey Kripal, who's at Rice University, who really suggests, he's like, look, if we're going to, the study of religion needs to incorporate these sorts of things. And I hope I'm pronouncing her last name correctly, Diana Pasuka, who's also a religious studies scholar. Her first book was American Cosmic, and she's got another one. But that's what she started doing. She did research on saints.
Mm-hmm.
And if I understand correctly, she was looking at saint visions in New Mexico. And she made the connection. She had access to the Vatican archives. And she made the connection. She's like, well, you know what? This is really weird because all of these saint visions and appearances are corresponding to where there were like UFO stories and whatnot. So there's definitely a religious, spiritual connection of sorts.
I think someone was making connections between that and Saint John of the Cross and Saint Teresa of Avila.
Hmm.
A couple of other of mystics.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and
That's
I agree. There's something about consciousness there, and
mhm.
it's that question of what's real, because it seems like there's something interjecting that's coming into the world. And this is why I get frustrated, because this is what I wanted to do in my master's thesis. And I was told, find something else. Because I saw that and I was like, I think that there's this interesting comparison that can be made with the fact that you've got all of these like crop circles showing up that can't really be explained. And it's like, well, let's look at crops and, cereals. Oh, Ceres. Oh, well, that's the name of Demeter. That's the Roman name of Demeter, the Greek goddess, Demeter. And then, oh, well, what's Demeter? Who was Demeter? And, oh, well, there's this whole thing about Persephone and the Eleusinian mysteries. And maybe there's a message coming from, not just from outside, but maybe Gaia herself is giving us a message, trying to get our attentions.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a very interesting idea. Yeah.
I don't know. Hermes, there's this idea of hermetic secrets.
Yeah.
Hermes, one of the first things he does, he stole Apollo's cattle. Gee, I wonder if that has anything to do, or maybe a connection with cattle mutilations. I don't know. There's something that's going on. But let's look at just disclosure itself, because this is something that comes up. So in July, we had someone who, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, David Grush. He was an intelligence officer in the Air Force and National Intelligence Agency, and two fighter pilots who had firsthand experience with UAPs. One was David Fravor, who spotted the object that is now very famous in the Tic Tac video. They both all three of them appeared before the House Oversight Committee's National Security Subcommittee, and said that Congress is being kept in the dark. So anti-revelation, right? Congress is being kept in the dark. Grush said that there was a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. He said that he was denied access to programs when he was examining classified programs for his work. He said the military was misappropriating funds to shield the operations from congressional oversight. He said that he had interviewed officials who had knowledge of aircraft with non-human origins, and that some, quote, biologics, unquote, were recovered from some craft. And all of this led to Chuck Schumer, and I apologize, there was actually a Republican congressperson also involved in this. They introduced an amendment to the annual defense spending bill, which was the UAP Disclosure Act, which would require executive branch agencies to turn over all the records to a review board for immediate disclosure. But they would also have to justify requests to keep records classified. So what this would have done is it would have established a formal collection process for collecting and investigating UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomena sightings. It was bipartisan. Both parties agreed. It was bipartisan. And then it was gutted. And this was not bipartisan. The House Armed Service Committee Chair Mike Rogers, Republican from Alabama. House Intelligence Committee Chair Mike Turner, Republican from Ohio, attempted to squash the act. They even seem to have the support of Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, obviously Republican, probably an alien. And new House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican.
I think we might have
from
evidence
Louisiana.
on that.
Yeah.
On the reptiles.
Oh, wait.
Yeah, that's
the
what I'm
party
saying.
about control is squashing something that gives us new information? Interesting.
Yes. Yeah. So what actually just passed last week was an agreement to collect government sightings and other data, but there was no presidential appointed review board that would review it for declassification. And their main argument was that there was a lack of cooperation, and this boggles my mind, that there was a lack of cooperation between the defense and intelligence communities. Right there, that should be news, right? If these two things aren't communicating properly, I want the defense and the military to talk, you know? But they're like, well, you know, there's this lack of cooperation between them. And so secret information might inadvertently be released. But yeah, let's not care about what's going down at, you know, Key Largo or secret binders, right?
Yeah.
So,
well,
no disclosure.
They had an initial. They had an initial piece in there that was supposed to state that if there was any threat to national security, that would give them enough to say no, they don't need to disclose at this moment, you know, because there's a threat. But yeah, all this did was give them a timeline of disclosure. You know, they had 300 days to disclose, and then they had a timeline for, okay, now they have to 100 some days to form a committee to counter, and you know, it just put all of this in a timeline for disclosure, committee, counter, blah blah blah. And it blows my mind, yeah, that they said, oh no, we can't do any of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That, if that didn't scream there's something going on, I mean, if they wanted to not scream that, they failed.
Yeah.
But then my mind is like, well, maybe that's what they want us to think.
Yeah. Well, next year we're going to do an entire episode on disclosure. So, just preview. But one of the arguments is that with these retrieved craft, a lot of technology has been pulled from this. And I've even heard that some corporations, or at least one, maybe, or two, are benefiting from this extraterrestrial or extra dimensional technology, whatever it is. And I think that leads us to the last bit here. And we'll probably run over here for a few minutes, but AI. We talked about AI previously, and I think we'll also do another episode on AI version 2.0. But that was also something from this past year.
Right.
It seemed like it was really big at the beginning of the year and then quieted down. But now it seems to be re-emerging.
Yep. Yeah, speaking of Skynet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. OpenAI and ChatGPT, you know, it was all the rage, and in March, and then it kind of went quiet for a while. And then just not even a month ago, we had the ousting of CEO Sam Altman from OpenAI. And that was huge. It was like, I guess the board, led by Greg, what was it, Brackman, said that they were concerned. They didn't give too much information, but they said that they were concerned about Sam Altman's lack of transparency regarding OpenAI and the direction that they wanted to take, and about the dangers of the commercialization of ChatGPT and AI in general. And they kicked him out, ousted him, and he went directly to Microsoft, and to Microsoft's open arms. They were like, yeah, Yeah, come here.
Hmm.
And it only took about 4 days, and he was back because there was a massive walkout at OpenAI. They just said, if he goes, we're all going, and we're all going to Microsoft.
Hmm.
And within 4 days, he was back at OpenAI, and the president, he quit in protest. And yeah, this is massive regarding AI,
Hmm.
because now we're looking at something which was open source, something that was non-commercial, going into a commercial aspect. That it's going to go there. Arguments for this are that it's going to go there anyways. Let's take this in the right direction. Let's take this in the direction that um, we can control it better. And the arguments, against this is that this is going to get out of control. This is, lacking transparency. This is a power grab. This isn't just like Altman being the new uh, Steve Jobs. This is like Altman. I mean, Steve Jobs, when he walked away from uh, Apple, he walked away for 12 years, and before he came back, uh, Altman walked away for 4 days,
Hmm.
and we're looking at more on the. This is like Darth McVader, level. It's just, it could be something that is good in terms of a controlled method of shifting something that would eventually become very commercial, but it can also just become something that is the nightmare that we think it's going to be,
Hmm.
because it's going to affect every single person on the planet. So, um,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's. Anyone have any thoughts on it right
Uh,
now?
uh, I am only saying, what I do is I immediately go to my experience as an educator and how AI is already infiltrating education.
Hmm.
Students are using it. And there's also this, they call them student bots. And these are fake student accounts. And the ongoing assumption is they're trying to um, get financial aid money. It's fraud. And unfortunately, some professors, because a class has to have so many students to run, and some professors are being a little bit unethical and not dropping the students. But they're all fake students, they're fake student accounts. And I've seen this personally. I had a class of 40 students, four of them were flesh and blood, the other 36 were fake. So the class got canceled, right? Because
Hmm.
I'm honest. But I've also experienced where I think that there's this merger of fake student accounts with AI. So someone is doing this, and all they're doing is just pumping in answers, and you can tell because the answers are all the same. There's a pattern to them. Um, and so someone is using this to get money for fraud. And it's like, and then you have real flesh and blood students who are giving actual answers that are generated through AI. And we're not actually set up now to really catch all of that. So, that's my perspective on it. And I don't know. And so, as you were talking, I was like, so, yeah, I don't like the idea of corporate control of anything. But if students have to pay for the AI, maybe that'll be preventative. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking interesting right now, because at the moment they're keeping it as open source, but
Yeah.
um, how is that going to go forward? It's anyone's guess right now,
Yeah.
because they're trying to keep things calm right now, but
Yeah.
it's the horse has left the gate. It's very clear that the concern they had over Altman is that he will take it commercial. Eventually we're going to get shareholders involved, and because it's valued in the billions at this point, there's no way they're not going to go private, or take it public. And turn this into a multi-bazillion-dollar industry. And that does scare the hell out of me. I don't see how it can be stopped.
Yeah.
It's just, to me, this is one of the biggest stories of 2023. And I don't think most people know it yet, or cognizant of how big this is. I mean, like I said, I think that Steve Jobs is very small in comparison to what Altman is right now. And it's just that no one knows it. I think he's the new emperor. And we'll see. We'll see if my prediction comes true. But that's where I stand on the issue. That's my prediction for this guy. But we'll see. We'll see where it goes.
Well, some have equated all of this with Pluto moving into Aquarius.
Aquarius,
yeah. And so Pluto went into Aquarius, and that seemed to be when all the AI stuff was in the news. And then it went back into Capricorn, and it goes back into Aquarius on January 21st, I think.
Yep.
It'll retrograde one more time just for like a month or so. And then 20 years.
20 years, yeah.
Yeah. So, it'll be interesting to see. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. So, we'll revisit this in depth next year. AI Apocalypse version 2.0.
Yep.
So, all right, we've gone over time. Is there anything that we missed other than Jeremy's recipe for the Kraken Manhattan? We'll put that in the show notes, in the video description. But anything, final thoughts before moving on?
Nothing from me. It's been a good year so far. I look forward to next year.
Yeah. Looking very much forward to next year. I think we have a lot to cover.
Yeah. So some of the things we've been talking about coming up, possibly. We've got a couple that are for sure. We're going to do an episode on the election in October, and probably do a deep dive in terms of maybe Christian nationalism, apocalyptic rhetoric in elections. So that'll be a good one. I think we're going to do a episode on disclosure. I'm going to insist on that one, Jeremy.
Right. For those who don't know what disclosure is, what is that?
Oh, the disclosure of UFOs, UAPs. Yeah, what we were talking about. And other realities, right? High strangeness is the key. I think we're going to do, possibly, we haven't agreed on this, I'm going to push for another deep dive like what we did with the book of Revelation on an apocalyptic text, like maybe the book of Enoch or possibly one of the Gnostic texts. Either one of those I think would be interesting. And we're thinking about doing one on conspiracy. Although there's the question of whether or not we can actually address the Illuminati, since Stephanie is a member of that.
I can't talk about that. I have told you over and over again.
Yeah. We've also talked about apocalypse and other religions. And I think that maybe a whole episode just on the idea of awakening in general, because that has a lot of apocalyptic aspects, and maybe quite possibly zombies. I think that may be one in there. I know Jeremy's really hungry for the zombies.
I'm hungry for their brains.
Yeah. So I think that's what's coming up next year. We're going to ramp up our social media presence. So as soon as we do that, we'll start telling people where to go to follow us. Right now, it's just on the Rebel Spirit Radio YouTube channel. And Facebook. I think we're going to do our own Facebook page and X and Threads and Instagram and all of that good stuff. So be prepared. We're going to expand. It's going to be a lot of fun. So, all right. Well, Stephanie, Jeremy, thank you for your time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah.
Thank you,
So,
Stephanie.
so we made it. Well, almost. We have 2 weeks left.
Jinx.
But I think we're going to make it through the year without the apocalypse happening. But 2024 is anyone's guess.
Knock on wood.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Until next year. Thank you,
Happy New
everyone.
Year.